"Why aren't you engaged yet?" her mother asked, the question slicing through the dinner table like a scalpel. It was a simple query, coated in innocence, delivered with a smile. But to me, it felt like being asked why I was still standing in a house that was already on fire, pretending it wasn't burning around me. How do you answer that when the truth is so much uglier than anyone wants to hear? When the truth is, I was waiting for her to stop lying. I was waiting for her to stop coming home with another man's scent wrapped around her skin like perfume. I was waiting for a version of her that I had fallen in love with, the one that looked me in the eyes and told me I was her world, not the one who disappeared behind late night texts and evasive answers. I said nothing that night. I smiled. I shrugged. She said, "I'm not ready to commit." That was her answer. Not ready. Not now. And her mother nodded, none the wiser. But I knew better. Not ready wasn't hesitation. It was deflection. It was the language of someone who had already chosen someone else in secret, but didn't want to surrender the comfort of the life she had built with me. Not ready was a mask she wore to keep from having to admit she'd already left me emotionally, even if her body still slept beside me. It's strange, the way infidelity doesn't just happen in bed. It happens in the pauses, in the guiltless lies, in the way they avoid your eyes. It happens when someone you love stops choosing you and starts pretending that you're still their first choice. And yet, you say nothing. You stay. Because sometimes, love makes you a hostage to hope. I stayed longer than I should have. I kept thinking maybe she'd come clean, that maybe I was imagining it, but love should not make you feel crazy. It should not make you second, guess your instincts or explain away your own pain. I knew what was happening. I just didn't want to face what it meant. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was that I had to wear a mask of happiness for her family, for our friends, for myself. That when her mother asked about engagement, I couldn't say, because she's seeing someone else. I couldn't break their hearts with the truth, so I let mine keep breaking instead. Eventually, I chose something stronger than staying. I chose myself. I chose the discomfort of walking away over the dishonor of living a lie. I packed my truth in silence, left behind the future we painted, and reclaimed the parts of me that had been slowly erased by her deceit. And yet, sometimes I still hear her mother's question echo in my mind, like a ghost that visits me when I least expect it. Why aren't you engaged yet? Because trust was broken, because loyalty died quietly, behind locked phone screens and late-night work events. Because I finally realized you don't build forever with someone who's still playing in the past. And maybe she'll say I wasn't perfect, that I wasn't attentive enough, or spontaneous enough, or passionate enough. But what I was faithful, and in a world where betrayal wears the disguise of hesitation, fidelity is no longer assumed. It is an active, sacred choice, one she didn't make. Infidelity is often portrayed as a singular, explosive moment, a discovery, a confrontation, a betrayal. But the deepest damage it causes isn't in the act itself. It's in the silence that follows. The hidden emotional toll doesn't announce itself with shouts or slammed doors. It seeps in slowly, over weeks and months, as the betrayed partner begins to live in a world of doubt, suspicion, and quiet suffering. It's a unique form of psychological erosion, an intimate collapse that only the one left in the dark truly experiences. The silence around infidelity isn't just about not telling the truth, it's about crafting an illusion. The unfaithful partner doesn't simply withhold information, they manipulate perception. They hug you tighter after a night with someone else, they smile as they lie, they gaslight you when your intuition starts to spark warning signs. And in that silence, the person being betrayed begins to turn inward. They begin to doubt their instincts, question their worth, and wonder if they're losing their mind. It's not just heartbreak, it's emotional warfare disguised as love. For the person being cheated on, every day becomes a performance. You start pretending everything is normal because confronting the possibility that it isn't means facing the pain of being abandoned without ever being left. You live in a house where the curtains are drawn not just over the windows, but over the truth. The one person you trust the most becomes a stranger with secrets. And yet, you make excuses for them. You convince yourself they're just tired, that the late nights are real, that the phone turned face down is an innocent habit. Because the alternative, that the person you love is betraying you, is too devastating to face without evidence, and so, silence wins. It becomes the quiet accomplice of betrayal. What's worse is how the silence protects the one doing harm. As long as they say nothing, as long as they cover their tracks and play their role well, they get to live a double life. They are unbothered. They still receive your affection, your trust, your presence, without offering real loyalty in return. And you, the faithful one, are trapped in a relationship built on a foundation that's already rotting underneath you. You carry the emotional weight while they float above consequence. The silence does more than hide the truth. It maintains the power imbalance. It keeps you small and unsure while they move confidently between two worlds. In many ways, the pain of infidelity is multiplied by the emotional isolation it creates. You don't tell your friends because you're not even sure yet. You don't confront them because you're afraid to push them away, or worse, be told you're imagining things. You live in this suspended reality where your gut screams the truth, but your heart begs for mercy. And that quiet suffering, that internal implosion, is what shatters your self-worth piece by piece. It's the silent mornings where you wonder why they're distant, the awkward glances when their phone buzzes and they leave the room, the laughter that no longer reaches their eyes. Every little moment becomes an echo of a bigger lie. And then comes the part where you start to hide too. You stop asking questions. You avoid eye contact during certain conversations. You bury your suspicions so deep, even you begin to believe them. You don't want to be the partner who snoops, who accuses, who can't trust. So instead, you suppress. You become complicit in your own emotional neglect. And all of this quiet inner war, is the real damage of infidelity. Not the affair itself, but what it turns you into a cautious, second, guessing version of yourself, who no longer feels safe in the arms that once felt like home. There's something especially cruel about being deceived in such an intimate space. When someone cheats, it's not just about physical betrayal, it's about emotional theft. They steal your peace, your security, your sense of shared reality. They smile at you with the same mouth that whispered to someone else. They share your bed while their heart is elsewhere, and all the while, you suffer in silence. You keep showing up, hoping love will fix what honesty could have prevented from breaking. This silence doesn't just protect the betrayal, it extends it. Every day that the truth isn't spoken is another day you live inside a lie. Another day that damages your ability to trust, not just them, but yourself, your intuition, your judgment. And when the truth finally comes out, the pain isn't just in the infidelity itself, it's in the realization that you weren't crazy, that your heart knew all along, that you lived in silence when you should have been screaming, that you loved someone who watched you suffer and said nothing. That is the hidden cost of infidelity, not just the betrayal, but the slow, agonizing unraveling of the person who didn't deserve it. I'm not ready to commit. Those 5 words sound harmless on the surface, measured, thoughtful, even responsible. But sometimes they are not about caution or personal growth. Sometimes not being ready is not a sign of emotional maturity, but a carefully constructed veil hiding something far more destructive: deception. When someone says they're not ready to commit, they might be disguising the fact that they are already committed, just not to you. The phrase is often presented as a noble truth. as if the person is doing you a favor by being honest about their hesitations. But in many cases, it's not honesty at all, it's delay. It's a way of stalling the inevitable conversation, the one that would unravel the secret life they're living behind your back. "I'm not ready" becomes a shield, a soft boundary that they can hide behind while continuing to reap the benefits of your loyalty and emotional investment. It allows them to stay close enough to keep your heart, but distant enough to never be held accountable. There's a certain cruelty in how "not ready" is used in relationships that are already being corroded by betrayal. It's not just a refusal to move forward. It's a way to keep you suspended in emotional limbo. You find yourself trapped between hope and doubt, constantly questioning whether their delay is rooted in real fear or simply a diversion from their dishonesty. You start to accommodate their unreadiness, bending yourself around it. You convince yourself to be patient, to be understanding. You tell yourself that love is about waiting, but in reality, you're waiting for someone who has already checked out emotionally, who is simply avoiding the confrontation of telling you the truth. What makes this illusion so painful is how it disguises itself as vulnerability. The person says they're not ready, and suddenly you become the caregiver, the one who supports them while they figure things out. But what they're really doing is asking you to stay still while they pursue something, or someone else. And because you care, you stay, you believe them, you respect their space. You hold back your own needs and desires, waiting for them to finally arrive at the place you've already been for months, or even years. This illusion of unreadiness is especially damaging because it subtly shifts the blame. Instead of addressing the real issue, the emotional withdrawal, the coldness, the late nights, the emotional absence, it makes it seem like the problem is simply bad timing. That if you just wait longer, love will catch up. That if you're more patient, more supportive, more understanding, everything will fall into place. But sometimes the real reason they're not ready is because they've already made a different choice, and they just haven't told you. And so, you end up carrying the weight of a relationship alone. You plan for a future with someone who's planning an escape. You nurture something that they're quietly abandoning. You build dreams on a foundation that's already been cracked by secrets and dishonesty. You find yourself constantly trying to prove your worth, hoping that if you just love them harder, they'll finally be ready. But readiness isn't something that can be forced. And when it's being used as a mask, no amount of love or loyalty can reveal the truth underneath unless they choose to expose it. There's also a profound emotional manipulation involved in using unreadiness as a cover. It offers just enough hope to keep you invested, while ensuring you never feel fully secure. It's the perfect illusion. They get the benefits of your love, your support, and your commitment, without having to give you the same in return. It's a one-sided arrangement cloaked in romantic restraint, and when you start to question it, they'll remind you of their honesty. "I told you I wasn't ready," they'll say, as if that justifies the pain they're causing. As if that explains why you've been emotionally starving while they dine elsewhere. But perhaps the hardest part is the self-deception you're forced into. You start to silence your own needs. You minimize your pain. You stop asking for more because you don't want to pressure them. You accept breadcrumbs of affection because you're terrified that demanding more will push them away. And in doing so, you begin to disappear inside the relationship. You become someone you barely recognize, someone who waits, someone who settles, someone who doubts themselves. When someone says they're not ready to commit, they may not be lying. But if they're also betraying your trust behind the scenes, then their unreadiness is not a phase. It's a strategy. It's a carefully constructed illusion to buy time, to avoid guilt, to keep you from walking away before they're done using your love as a backup plan. And that's what makes it so damaging. It isn't just the pause in progress. It's the hidden betrayal beneath the surface of those carefully chosen words. Not ready isn't always an innocent truth. Sometimes, it's the most polite way to say, I'm already gone, and I just don't want you to know yet. There's a specific kind of torment in being questioned by the people who love you most while you're silently bearing the weight of betrayal. When her mother asked, "Why aren't you engaged yet?" she wasn't prying, she was hopeful, maybe even a little impatient for a joyful next chapter. But for me, that question felt like standing under a spotlight with nowhere to run, while a secret I didn't dare speak tightened around my throat like a noose. That simple question, innocent and well-intentioned, carried a violence I couldn't explain, not because of what was asked, but because of what I knew and couldn't say. What no one sees in these moments is the war raging behind your smile. You become an expert in performance, laughing at the right times, nodding along, pretending everything is fine, while internally you're screaming. It's an emotional masquerade, and your audience is made up of people who trust what they see. They ask questions not to corner you, but because they believe in the relationship you're pretending still exists. They believe in her and in your future together because they don't know the truth, that you're sleeping beside someone who is emotionally absent, possibly even in love with someone else, while you clutch onto a relationship built on deception. The pain deepens not just because you're lying to others, but because you're forced to lie to yourself. Every time someone asks why things aren't progressing, every time they point out how long you've been together and how well you seem to fit, it presses on your ribs like a bruise you forgot was there. You give vague responses, you shift the conversation, you deflect, and each time you do, you feel yourself fracture a little more, because the truth is sitting at the back of your throat, and swallowing it every day is slowly killing you. There's a special kind of isolation that comes from carrying this hidden truth, while being surrounded by people who would support you, if only they knew. You can't tell her mother that the daughter she's so proud of has been seeing someone else. You can't disrupt the family dinners or the shared smiles by pulling the curtain back on your private devastation. So instead, you endure. You let them believe in something that's already crumbled. And the longer it goes on, the more ashamed you feel, not just of what's happening, but of your inability to speak up. The betrayal becomes layered. It's no longer just about the cheating. It's about being made complicit in your own silencing. You begin to resent the people around you, not because they've done anything wrong, but because their questions force you to confront the lies you've been living with. You start to avoid conversations, dodge gatherings, distance yourself from the very people who love you, because being around them reminds you of the truth you're trying so hard to hide. And with each evasion, the isolation grows until you're no longer just dealing with a broken relationship. You're also grieving the version of yourself that used to feel safe, open, and honest in front of the people who matter most. There's also the shame of being the one who didn't leave sooner, who still showed up with gifts for the holidays, who still smiled in family photos, who still said, "We're just taking our time," even though you were bleeding on the inside. The shame of having seen the signs and stayed anyway. The shame of knowing that the people you love are rooting for a love story that has already ended behind closed doors. You begin to question your identity. Are you weak for staying? Are you a coward for not exposing the truth? Or are you simply someone who believed in love too much and was afraid to admit that it wasn't enough? And when people ask about your plans, engagement, moving in, marriage, you feel like a fraud. You feel like you're selling a story you no longer believe in, because the real story would break their hearts. What hurts the most is that these questions come from a place of love. They come from people who care, who are genuinely invested in your happiness. But in your silence, their love becomes another pressure point. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting their perception of her. You're protecting their joy, their hopes, their belief in your relationship. And in doing so, you sacrifice your truth, your peace, and eventually, your identity. Being questioned by family when you're living with unspoken betrayal is like being asked to smile while standing in a room full of smoke. You know the fire is real, even if no one else can smell it. And the longer you stay silent, the more you begin to choke. Until eventually, you realize that the cost of protecting a lie is your own emotional survival. And the only way to breathe again is to stop pretending, even if it means walking away from the life everyone else thought you had. Choosing self-respect over denial doesn't happen all at once. It's not a grand, cinematic moment of packing a bag and slamming a door. It's a series of quiet realizations, stacked one on top of the other, until the weight of your own truth finally becomes heavier than your fear of being alone. You don't just wake up and decide to walk away from someone you've loved. You begin to wake up to how much of yourself you've already lost by staying. There's a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes searing, when you recognize that no matter how much you give, it will never make them honest. That no matter how patient, kind, or forgiving you are, it won't fix what they broke in secret. This is the moment where the illusion crumbles. You see the person not as who you hoped they were, but for who they've chosen to be. Someone who can look you in the eye, say they love you, and still betray you behind your back, and that's when the shift begins. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in something far more powerful, clarity. Clarity is brutal. It doesn't offer comfort. It rips the veil away. You see how many nights you excused the inexcusable. How many mornings you woke up beside someone who had just come back from somewhere they had no business being. You start to count the lies, the strange behavior, the emotional distance. You start to recognize that you were not crazy. You were simply too loyal to believe that the person you loved could treat you with such cold disregard. And once that clarity roots itself inside you, denial loses its grip. Denial is a survival mechanism. It allows you to keep functioning when the truth is too painful to absorb. It says, maybe it's just stress, maybe they're distant because of work, maybe I'm overthinking. Denial lets you rewrite the story to keep your heart safe. But denial also keeps you trapped. It keeps you feeding a relationship that has already begun to starve you. It makes you gaslight yourself before they even have to. It convinces you that silence is strength, that enduring is love. But real strength is knowing when to stop bleeding for someone who won't even admit they cut you. Choosing self-respect means accepting that love is not enough if it comes without truth. It means saying to yourself, I deserve more than apologies that only come after being caught. I deserve more than affection used as damage control. It's in the refusal to continue shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's lie. It's the decision to believe your instincts instead of begging for scraps of reassurance from someone who has already broken your trust. Self-respect says, I will not sit at the table of someone who feeds me doubt while dining on my devotion. Walking away is never easy. It's terrifying, because for so long, your identity has been wrapped around this relationship. You've been us. You've been building a life around we. And the idea of starting over, of having to say, it's just me now, feels like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. But there comes a point where staying becomes more painful than leaving, when you realize that the silence, the betrayal, the erosion of your joy is not love, it's self-abandonment, and the only way back to yourself is through the door you've been too afraid to open. You don't leave because you stopped loving them, you leave because you finally started loving yourself more. You leave because the version of you that stayed silent, that accepted half-truths, that tried to hold together something built on deceit, that version deserves to be set free. You begin to remember who you were before the lies dulled your shine, before the suspicion made you anxious, before you had to monitor someone else's behavior like a detective instead of being cherished like a partner. Choosing self-respect Respect doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes you never get an apology. Sometimes they deny everything. Sometimes they paint you as bitter, dramatic, or unforgiving. But self-respect isn't about them. It's about reclaiming your dignity. It's about deciding that you will no longer participate in your own heartbreak, that you are no longer available for people who love you with conditions, limitations, or secrets. And eventually, something beautiful happens. The silence that once suffocated you becomes peaceful. The space they left behind becomes sacred. You begin to laugh without suspicion, to feel without fear, to trust yourself again, because you didn't just walk away from someone who betrayed you. You walked back into your own life, into your own worth, into your own truth. And that is the quiet revolution of self-respect. When you finally decide that your soul is no longer for sale at the price of someone else's convenience.